The scent of pine needles and damp earth filled my lungs as I stood at the edge of the clearing, my heart pounding against my rib cage like a trapped bird. The pack gathered in their ceremonial circle, bodies tense with anticipation, their whispers carried by the autumn breeze that tangled my pale blonde hair. Tonight was my claiming ceremony, the ritual every unmated wolf in our pack dreaded and desired in equal measure. The moon hung full and heavy above us, casting silver light across faces that refused to meet my eyes. I clutched the small wooden pendant my grandmother had pressed into my palm before she died. "When the world turns its back on you, Evelyn," she had whispered, her voice thin with age. "Remember that true strength grows in the spaces between heartbeats, in the silent moments when you choose to rise instead of break." The pendant was warm against my skin, polished smooth from generations of anxious fingers before mine. My pack wasn't like others. We were traditional to a fault, clinging to ancient hierarchies that most modern packs had abandoned decades ago. Our alpha, Nathaniel Stone, ruled with unquestioned authority, his decisions as binding as physical law. In our pack, wolves were matched according to strength and bloodline, with little regard for personal choice. As a low-ranked wolf with unremarkable abilities, I had always known my options would be limited. Still, I had hoped. Evelyn Pierce, Alpha Stone's voice cut through the night, deep and resonant with power that made my wolf instinctively lower her head in submission. I stepped forward into the circle, feeling the weight of every gaze. My simple blue dress fluttered around my knees, far less ornate than what the higher-ranked females wore to their ceremonies. The fire at the center of the clearing threw dancing shadows across Alpha Stone's face, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw and the cold calculation in his eyes as he assessed me. "You stand before your pack on your 25th year, seeking your place among us," he continued, reciting the ceremonial words with practiced precision. "Your blood has served the Stone Pack for generations. Tonight, we determine your future." I kept my eyes downcast, the way we'd been taught. A proper she-wolf never challenged authority, especially not during sacred rites. But beneath my carefully composed exterior, anxiety clawed at my insides. In our pack, being rejected at a claiming ceremony meant exile, or, at best, relegation to the lowest ranks, servants to the mated pairs, destined to live on the fringes of pack life. The pack members formed a tight circle around us. I recognized Rachel Stevens watching with thinly veiled satisfaction, her copper hair gleaming in the firelight. As the daughter of our pack's beta, she had always made it clear she considered me beneath notice. Beside her stood Marco, her twin brother, the only pack member who had ever shown me kindness. His expression was troubled, but he offered a small nod of encouragement when our eyes briefly met. "The council has considered potential matches," Alpha Stone announced, his voice devoid of emotion. "We find no suitable mate for Evelyn Pierce within our ranks." The words fell like stones into still water. Ripples of whispers spread through the gathered wolves, some sympathetic, most merely curious to see how the ritual rejection would unfold. My chest tightened painfully, though I had half expected this outcome. Still, hearing it proclaimed before everyone made shame burn hot beneath my skin. "Does any male of age and standing wish to challenge this decision?" Alpha Stone asked, following protocol, though we all knew the question was a mere formality. No one had challenged an alpha's matching decision in over 50 years. Silence stretched across the clearing. I kept my gaze fixed on a small patch of dirt before my feet, refusing to let them see the hurt that threatened to overwhelm me. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "Dignity cannot be taken, only surrendered." Then, something unexpected happened. A throat cleared, and Marco stepped forward. "I would speak, Alpha." A collective intake of breath swept through the pack. Rachel hissed her brother's name in warning, but he ignored her, standing tall at the edge of the circle. Alpha Stone's expression darkened. "You are not challenging the decision, Beta Son. Merely speaking. Make it brief. Evelyn Pierce has served this pack loyally. She has shown exceptional skill in healing, attending to injuries that our official healer overlooked. When the Lambert pups fell ill last winter, it was Evelyn who stayed awake for 3 nights, nursing them back to health." His voice grew stronger with each word. "A wolf's value cannot be measured by dominance alone." I dared to glance up, startled by this unexpected defense. Marco's eyes held no romantic interest. We had always been friends and nothing more. But his words sparked something dangerous in the air. a challenge to the very foundations of how our pack operated. Alpha Stone's jaw tightened. Your concern is noted, but irrelevant to these proceedings. The Council's decision stands. The dismissal was swift and final. Marco stepped back, his attempt at intervention effectively silenced. But something had shifted in the atmosphere of the clearing. A sense of unease rippled through the ranks, eyes darting between Marco and the Alpha. Then came the moment I had dreaded most. According to tradition, I now had to publicly accept my rejection, acknowledging my place, or lack thereof, in the pack hierarchy. Drawing a deep breath, I stepped forward. The ceremonial response required submission, a promise to serve the pack in whatever capacity the Alpha deemed fit. But as I opened my mouth, something different emerged. I accept your decision, Alpha Stone, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I accept that there is no suitable match for me within the Stone Pack. It was the words that followed that caused the clearing to go deadly silent. And I accept that perhaps it is not I who lacks value, but a system that measures worth by outdated standards. A collective gasp rippled through the gathered wolves. Alpha Stone's eyes flashed dangerously, the wolf within him rising close to the surface. I had deviated from the script, spoken words that bordered on insubordination. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. But I held my ground, grandmother's pendant clutched tightly in my palm. You forget yourself, Alpha Stone growled, his voice dropping an octave, heavy with the weight of his dominant power. I lowered my eyes, not in submission, but to hide the defiance I couldn't fully suppress. I apologize for speaking out of turn. I accept the pack's decision. The tension in the air was palpable, as Alpha Stone regarded me, calculating his response. To punish me publicly would acknowledge that my words had power enough to threaten him. To ignore them might suggest weakness. After what felt like eternity, he nodded curtly. Evelyn Pierce will remain within the pack as an unmated female. She will assist Elder Miriam with healing duties and reside in the eastern cabins. His decree effectively relegated me to the outskirts of pack life, but stopped short of exile, a calculated move that maintained the appearance of mercy while ensuring I understood my place. The ceremony continued, but the damage was done. As I stepped back into the shadows at the edge of the clearing, I felt the pack's collective withdrawal. Conversations faltered when I passed. Eyes slid away from mine, and even those who had been friendly before gave me a wide berth. Only Marco attempted to approach me afterward, but his sister pulled him away with urgent whispers and meaningful glances toward their father, who watched with disapproval. I had been officially rejected, but more than that, I had broken an unspoken rule by accepting that rejection with anything less than complete submission. The pack's silence was my punishment, a social death more effective than physical banishment. That night, I walked alone back to my small cabin at the eastern edge of pack territory. Rain had begun to fall, gentle at first, then with increasing intensity that matched the storm inside me. By the time I reached my door, I was soaked through, my dress clinging to my skin and my hair plastered to my face. But I welcomed the cold clarity it brought. Inside, I lit a fire in the small hearth and changed into dry clothes, trying to quiet the thoughts racing through my mind. What would happen tomorrow? Would the pack's silence continue indefinitely? Would Alpha Stone reconsider and exile me after all? As I combed through my tangled blonde hair, a knock at my door startled me. Visitors were rare even before tonight's events. Cautiously, I opened it to find Elder Miriam, the pack's oldest member and keeper of our histories, standing in the rain. "May I enter?" she asked, her voice rough with age. I stepped aside, wondering if she had been sent to deliver further punishment. Miriam moved slowly to the chair nearest the fire, lowering herself with a soft grunt of discomfort. "You caused quite a stir tonight, child." I spoke without thinking, I replied, though we both knew it wasn't entirely true. "It won't happen again." Miriam's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. "Your grandmother had the same fire in her." Maeve Pierce never did learn to hold her tongue when injustice stood before her. The mention of my grandmother made my throat tighten. "You knew her well? We were like sisters, in the days before Stone took leadership." Miriam's eyes grew distant with memory. The pack was different then. The old Alpha, Gregory Hale, believed in balance between tradition and progress. I sat across from her, curious despite my wariness. "What happened?" "Power shifts. Alliances change." Miriam shrugged, but there was sadness in the gesture. "What matters is that you now find yourself in a precarious position, Evelyn. The pack will follow Stone's lead in isolating you, but... She leaned forward, lowering her voice though we were alone. There are whispers from the Northern Territories. The Alpha King is coming. My breath caught. The Alpha King was nearly mythical to our pack, the ruler of all North American wolf packs, said to be the strongest alpha born in 5 generations. His visits to individual territories were rare, and usually signaled major changes in leadership or boundaries. Why would he come here? I asked, unable to hide my surprise. Stone has not been as forthcoming with the Council of Alphas as he should be. Resources have gone missing. Travelers from other packs have disappeared while passing through our territory. Miriam's expression grew grave. And there are rumors about experiments. Attempts to enhance alpha abilities through means the old laws forbid. A chill that had nothing to do with my rain-soaked clothes ran through me. What does this have to do with me? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps everything. Miriam rose slowly to her feet. But you showed courage tonight, when everyone expected submission. Such courage may be needed in the days to come. She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. This belonged to your grandmother. She asked me to keep it until the right time. I accepted the pouch, feeling its weight in my palm. What is it? A truth that has waited long enough. Miriam replied cryptically. Open it when you're alone, and remember that not all strength roars. Sometimes, it whispers. With those words, she left, disappearing into the rain-soaked night and leaving me with more questions than answers. Inside the pouch, I found a small crystal vial containing what looked like ordinary water, and a folded note in my grandmother's handwriting. When the king's control shatters, only the rejected can restore balance. The water from the sacred pool reveals what eyes cannot see. I stared at the cryptic message, turning it over in my mind as thunder rumbled in the distance. Outside my window, the forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Something was coming, a storm, a change, a reckoning, and somehow I stood at its center. The next morning dawned gray and listless, matching the hollow feeling in my chest. I tucked my grandmother's vial and note into a small leather pouch I wore beneath my clothes, their mystery a constant presence against my skin. The eastern cabin area was usually quiet, housing only the unmated and lower-ranked wolves, but today, the silence held a different quality, deliberate and oppressive. I walked toward the communal gardens where I normally helped tend the medicinal herbs, only to find Rachel already there with 2 other females. Their conversation died abruptly as I approached. Rachel's lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. Evelyn, she said, her voice carrying artificial sweetness. I don't believe your assistance is required today. Or tomorrow, for that matter. She made a show of consulting a small notebook. In fact, Elder Miriam has requested you focus entirely on reorganizing the healing stores, alone. The message was clear. I was being isolated from even the most basic pack activities. The 2 females beside Rachel avoided my gaze, their discomfort evident in the way they shifted their weight, and found sudden interest in the plants before them. I see, I replied, keeping my voice neutral despite the sting of rejection. Please let me know if that changes. As I turned to leave, Rachel called after me. My brother asked about you this morning. I told him you were adjusting well to your new position. The pause was deliberate, a subtle reminder of my fallen status. He's been assigned to the Northern Border Patrol for the next month. Alpha Stone thought his talents would be better utilized there. The message beneath her words was clear. Marco was being punished for speaking up on my behalf. Sent to the coldest, most isolated border our territory shared with the wilderness. I nodded without turning around, unwilling to give Rachel the satisfaction of seeing how her words affected me. The healing stores were located in a small building adjacent to Elder Miriam's cabin, a place I knew well from my informal apprenticeship. Inside, dried herbs hung from the rafters, jars of tinctures lined rough wooden shelves, and the air smelled of lavender and sage. It was a peaceful space that had always brought me comfort, but today, even this sanctuary felt tainted by my new reality. I was halfway through reorganizing a shelf of fever remedies when the door creaked open. Elder Miriam entered, her face unreadable as she closed the door firmly behind her. "We won't be disturbed," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Stone has called an emergency council meeting. Something has the Alphas agitated." "The Alpha King?" I guessed, remembering our conversation from the previous night. Miriam nodded, moving deeper into the room where the shadows were thickest. "His arrival has been confirmed. 3 days from now, our territory will host not just the king, but his personal guard and representatives from neighboring packs. Her roomy eyes fixed on me with surprising intensity. This hasn't happened in over 50 years, Evelyn. Not since the Great Accord was signed. I frowned, trying to recall the history lessons we'd been taught as pups. The Great Accord was a peace treaty between all North American packs, established after a bloody war that had decimated our numbers. It set boundaries, laws, and a chain of command that placed the Alpha King at the top of a carefully balanced power structure. Why now? I asked, setting down the jar I'd been holding. What's changed? Everything and nothing, Miriam replied enigmatically. She moved closer, her voice dropping even lower. Have you examined what I gave you? I touched the small bulge beneath my shirt where the pouch rested, the vial and the note. Yes, but I don't understand them. Your grandmother was more than just a healer, Evelyn. She was a seer, one of the last of our kind with the ability to glimpse potential futures. Miriam's revelation sent a shock through me. Such abilities were rare and often feared, even among our own kind. Before she died, Maeve saw darkness coming for our pack. She believed it centered around Stone and his obsession with power. The pieces began to align in my mind. My grandmother's cryptic warnings, the way she'd insisted I learn the old healing ways rather than focusing on strength and dominance like other young wolves. She had been preparing me for something. What does this have to do with me? I asked, though a part of me already suspected the answer. Miriam smiled sadly. The gift often passes through bloodlines, child. Have you never wondered why you sense injuries before they're visible? Why you dream of events before they happen? My mouth went dry. There had been incidents, premonitions I'd dismissed as coincidence, feelings too accurate to be mere intuition. I'd hidden these experiences, instinctively knowing they would make me even more of an outsider. If Stone knew, I began, a chill running through me. He would either exile you or use you. Miriam finished grimly, which is why your grandmother and I agreed to keep your potential hidden. But now... She glanced toward the window, where dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Now the king comes, and with him, change. You must be prepared. A commotion outside drew our attention. Through the small window, I could see wolves gathering near the main lodge. At the center of the crowd stood Alpha Stone, his powerful frame tense as he addressed the pack. Even from a distance, I could sense the anger radiating from him. What's happening? I whispered, moving closer to the window. Miriam joined me, her breath fogging the glass. Stone is announcing the king's visit. He's not pleased to have his authority scrutinized. We watched as Stone gestured emphatically, his second-in-command, Beta Stevens, standing rigidly beside him. The pack's reaction was mixed, some excited by the rare royal visit, others clearly sharing their alpha's displeasure. I noticed several unfamiliar wolves at the edges of the gathering, scouts from the Alpha King's guard, their posture and bearing unmistakable even at a distance. Listen carefully, Evelyn, Miriam said, turning from the window. Tonight, when the moon rises, bring the vial to the Whispering Pool. You know the place? I nodded. The Whispering Pool was a small, crystal-clear spring deep in pack territory, surrounded by ancient oak trees. It was said to have mystical properties, though most modern wolves dismiss such notions as superstition. Pour 3 drops of your blood into the vial, then add the mixture to the pool. If your grandmother was right, if you carry the seer's gift, the waters will show you what you need to know. Miriam's gnarled hand closed over mine. But be cautious. Stone has doubled the patrols since learning of the king's visit. If you're caught, the unspoken threat hung between us. Trespassing in sacred areas without permission was a serious offense, one that could result in official exile or worse. I understand, I assured her, though my heart pounded at the thought. Elder Miriam left shortly after, called to the Alpha's meeting, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the endless task of reorganizing herbs that were already perfectly arranged. As dusk approached, I made my way back to my cabin, acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed me. The rejection ceremony had marked me as different, but something else now colored the pack's reaction. Curiosity, and perhaps a touch of fear. I heated a simple stew over my small stove, eating mechanically while watching the sun sink below the tree line. When darkness finally fell, I changed into dark clothing and slipped the vial into my pocket. The night was moonless, clouds obscuring the stars. Perfect conditions for moving unseen through the territory. I left through my back window rather than the door, avoiding the more traveled paths as I made my way deeper into the forest. Years of gathering herbs had made me familiar with every hollow and hillock of our territory, knowledge that served me well as I navigated in near darkness. Twice I froze at the sound of patrolling wolves, pressing myself against tree trunks until they passed. The Whispering Pool lay in a small depression, surrounded by ancient oaks, their massive roots forming natural steps down to the water's edge. As I approached, a strange sensation washed over me, a tingling awareness that raised the hair on my arms. The pool itself seemed to glow with faint luminescence, despite the absence of moonlight. I knelt at the water's edge, removing the crystal vial from my grandmother's pouch. The liquid inside caught what little light filtered through the trees, shimmering with an opalescent quality I hadn't noticed before. Following Miriam's instructions, I pricked my finger with a small knife I carried and allowed 3 drops of blood to fall into the vial. The clear liquid inside instantly turned a deep, swirling crimson. With trembling hands, I unstoppered the vial and poured its contents into the pool. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, starting from the point where the mixture had entered, the water began to glow more intensely, ripples spreading outward in perfect circles until the entire pool pulsed with light. I leaned forward, drawn by an irresistible pull, and gazed into the illuminated waters. At first, I saw only my own reflection, pale and wide-eyed with wonder. Then the image shifted, rippled, and reformed into something else entirely. A massive black wolf with eyes like burning coals stood atop a rocky outcropping, his posture radiating power and barely contained rage. Around him, smaller wolves cowered in submission. As I watched, the black wolf threw back his head and howled, a sound so filled with anguish and fury that even in the vision I flinched. Then, before my eyes, the wolf began to change, his form blurring and expanding until it seemed he would burst from his own skin. The vision shifted again, showing Alpha Stone in his human form, standing in a hidden chamber I didn't recognize. He was surrounded by strange equipment, vials of glowing substances, and what appeared to be ancient texts. His face was twisted with a hunger that made my blood run cold. Another shift, and I saw myself standing between 2 powerful forces, Stone on one side, the massive black wolf on the other. Between us lay something small and bright, something both sought to possess. "Choose," a voice whispered from the water, sounding eerily like my grandmother. "When the moment comes, you must choose." The vision blurred, fractured, then resolved into a final image. The pack gathered in the ceremonial clearing, but this time in chaos. Wolves fought wolves, blood stained the earth, and at the center, 2 massive alphas locked in mortal combat, Stone and a stranger whose presence seemed to bend reality around him. As they fought, darkness spread from Stone like ink in water, corrupting everything it touched. Above this scene of destruction, the moon turned blood red, and a howl of such profound loss echoed through the vision that tears sprang to my eyes. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the images vanished, leaving only the softly glowing pool and my own reflection, tears streaming down my face. I sat back on my heels, shaken to my core by what I'd witnessed. Were these events destined to happen? Could they be prevented? And what was the choice my grandmother's voice had warned about? Lost in thought, I failed to notice the subtle shifting of shadows at the pool's edge until it was too late. A low growl broke the silence, and I looked up to see 4 wolves emerging from the darkness, their eyes reflecting the pool's fading light. I recognized Beta Stevens among them, his gray fur bristling with aggression. They had caught me in a forbidden place, performing forbidden magic. In their eyes, I had just confirmed every suspicion, every whispered accusation of difference. There would be no explaining this away, no mercy to be found. I stood slowly, careful to make no sudden movements. "I can explain," I began, though I knew no explanation would suffice. Beta Stevens shifted to his human form, his expression hard as stone. "Alpha Stone will determine your fate, witch," he spat, the last word loaded with all the fear and hatred wolves had harbored for magical beings since ancient times. The other wolves moved to surround me, leaving no path for escape. I could have shifted, could have tried to run, but my wolf form was no match for theirs in speed or strength. Instead, I straightened my back and met Beta Stevens's gaze directly. "I am no witch," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I am a daughter of this pack, seeking answers. The only answers you'll find now are in Stone's judgment," he replied coldly, nodding to his companions. "Take her to the holding cells. The Alpha will deal with her at dawn." As they closed in around me, rough hands grasping my arms, I caught a glimpse of movement in the trees beyond. A flash of copper hair quickly withdrawn. Rachel had been watching, perhaps had even been the one to alert her father to my presence. The betrayal shouldn't have stung, given our history, but somehow it did. They marched me back through the forest, not bothering to be gentle. My mind raced, thinking of Miriam, of the visions I'd seen, of the Alpha King's imminent arrival. Something momentous was building, something that centered around our pack and Stone's hidden activities, and somehow, impossibly, I stood at the crossroads of it all. The holding cells were located beneath the main lodge, small reinforced rooms rarely used except for the most serious offenses. As they locked the heavy door behind me, leaving me alone in the dimly lit space, Beta Stevens' parting words echoed in the confined space. "Pray to whatever powers you commune with, Evelyn Pierce. You'll need their mercy come morning." The cell was cold stone and shadows, with only a narrow slit near the ceiling, allowing any hint of the approaching dawn. I sat on the hard bench, my back against the wall, fingering the empty pouch where my grandmother's vial had been. Beta Stevens had confiscated it, along with my small knife and the leather cord I'd worn around my neck. The visions from the whispering pool replayed in my mind, fragmented but vivid, the Black Wolf's anguish, Stone surrounded by forbidden artifacts, the blood-red moon hanging over a pack torn apart by conflict. Sleep had eluded me throughout the night, leaving my thoughts sharp despite my exhaustion. I knew what awaited me, a formal trial before the pack, with Alpha Stone as both judge and executioner. The use of old magic was strictly forbidden, a taboo reinforced by generations of fear. The best I could hope for was permanent exile. The worst didn't bear contemplating. Footsteps in the corridor outside drew my attention. The door swung open, revealing Elder Miriam supported by a grim-faced Marco. His unexpected presence startled me. He should have been patrolling the northern border miles away. 5 minutes, he told Miriam, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "Any longer and someone will notice." Miriam nodded, moving into the cell with surprising speed for one so aged. Marco gave me a quick, unreadable look before closing the door, remaining outside to stand guard. "They found me at the pool," I said unnecessarily, my voice hoarse from thirst and worry. "Rachel followed you," Miriam confirmed, her mouth set in a tight line. "That girl has been Stone's creature since she came of age, always watching, always reporting." I leaned forward, keeping my voice low. "I saw things in the water, Miriam. Terrible things. A black wolf losing control, Stone with strange equipment, the pack fighting itself." Miriam's eyes widened fractionally. "The king," she whispered. "The Black Wolf is the Alpha King. Your grandmother foresaw this too. His coming, his rage. But not the reason behind it. Stone is doing something forbidden," I continued, the pieces falling into place. "Something to do with Alpha power. Not just something. Everything forbidden," Miriam replied, her voice laced with disgust. "Stone has been experimenting with blood magic, trying to enhance his own abilities. 5 wolves have already disappeared, supposedly on long-range patrols. But I've seen the secret records. They were test subjects." Horror crawled up my spine. Blood magic was the darkest of arts, requiring sacrifice and causing corruption that spread beyond the practitioner to poison everything around them. If Stone had indeed turned to such means, it explained the growing tension in the pack, the inexplicable aggression that had been simmering beneath the surface. "The Alpha King suspects," I guessed. "That's why he's coming." Miriam nodded. "The balance between packs depends on certain limitations. No Alpha can become too powerful without threatening the entire structure. The king enforces these boundaries. If he confirms Stone's violations..." She left the sentence unfinished, but I understood. War between our pack and the royal forces would be devastating. "What can I do from a cell?" I asked, frustration coloring my tone. "Your trial is set for midday. The entire pack will be present, including the king's advanced scouts." Miriam reached into her sleeve and withdrew a small cloth bundle. "They must hear what you've seen." I stared at her, disbelief washing over me. "They'll never believe me." I'm already branded a witch. Some will believe, Miriam insisted, pressing the bundle into my hands. Those who remember your grandmother's gift, those who have sensed the wrongness growing in our territory. And the king's scouts, they've been sent specifically to look for signs of corruption. The bundle contained a small vial similar to the one that had been taken from me, filled with the same opalescent liquid. Another vision potion? Miriam shook her head. Protection. When the moment comes, break this against your skin. It won't save you from everything, but it will shield your mind from certain influences. A soft knock at the door signaled our time was ending. Miriam grasped my hands in her weathered ones, her grip surprisingly strong. Remember, Evelyn, not all strength roars, and not all packs follow the same alpha. Before I could ask what she meant, Marco opened the door, his expression tense. Someone's coming. Elder, you need to leave now. Miriam straightened, resuming the stooped posture she typically affected around others. As she shuffled out, she cast one last meaningful glance in my direction. Marco hesitated at the threshold, conflict evident in his eyes. Why are you here? I asked quietly. You were assigned to the northern border. A muscle jumped in his jaw. I requested temporary leave to attend your trial. My father was displeased, but allowed it. Why risk Stone's anger for me? Marco's gaze dropped to the floor between us. Because what's happening isn't right, none of it. He looked up again, something fierce breaking through his usual reserved demeanor. And because I saw what my sister did, following you, reporting to my father, I couldn't stand by this time. Footsteps approached down the corridor, heavy and purposeful. Marco stepped back, his expression shuddering. I have to go. But I'll be at the trial, Evelyn. You won't stand alone. As he closed the door, I quickly tucked Miriam's vial into a hidden pocket sewn into the lining of my shirt. Not a moment too soon, the footsteps stopped outside, and the door swung open to reveal Alpha Stone himself, flanked by two of his most loyal enforcers. In person, Stone was an intimidating presence, tall and broad-shouldered, with streaks of gray at his temples that did nothing to diminish his aura of strength. His eyes were the cold blue of deep ice, and just as unyielding. Today, dressed in the formal black attire he reserved for pack judgments, he looked every inch the powerful alpha. But now, with Miriam's warnings fresh in my mind, I noticed things I hadn't before. The unnatural pallor beneath his tanned skin, the faint tremor in his left hand that he tried to hide, and most telling of all, the subtle wrongness in his scent. Something acrid and alien clung to him, barely detectable beneath his natural wolf musk. Evelyn Pierce, he said, my name falling from his lips like a judgment. Caught performing forbidden rituals at a sacred site. Did you think your rejection gave you license to turn against pack law? I straightened my shoulders, meeting his gaze despite every instinct screaming at me to submit. I sought answers, Alpha Stone, nothing more. Answers? His lip curled in disdain. What questions could possibly justify communing with dark forces? Perhaps the same questions that lead an alpha to blood magic, I replied before I could stop myself. Stone went perfectly still, a predator assessing sudden danger. Behind him, his enforcers exchanged uneasy glances. My accusation hung in the air between us, bold and dangerous. Careful, little wolf, Stone said softly, dangerously. False accusations carry their own punishment. And true ones, I challenged, emboldened by desperation. What did I have to lose now? Stone's expression shifted, calculation replacing anger. He stepped further into the cell, close enough that I could feel the unnatural heat radiating from him. Another sign of the corruption working through his system. You know nothing, he said, his voice pitched for my ears alone, but you suspect, which makes you dangerous. I had planned to be merciful, exile rather than execution. But now I see that's not an option. Fear shot through me, but I held my ground. The king comes tomorrow. He'll know what you've done. Something flickered in Stone's eyes. Not fear, exactly, but wariness. The king is powerful, but not omniscient. By the time he arrives, there will be no evidence, and no accusers. His gaze lingered meaningfully on me. Your trial will proceed as planned. Your sentence has merely evolved. He turned to leave, then paused at the threshold. A pity, really. In another life, your gift might have been useful to me. Your grandmother certainly thought so. The casual reference to my grandmother sent ice through my veins. What do you mean? Stone smiled coldly over his shoulder. Who do you think was my first successful experiment, Evelyn? Before her gift burned her from the inside out. Maeve Pierce showed me possibilities I'd never dreamed of. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My grandmother, the woman who had raised me after my parents' death, who had taught me healing and kindness, she had been Stone's victim, not his collaborator. The patterns aligned with sickening clarity. Her sudden illness, the strange fevers and delusions in her final weeks, her desperate insistence that I be prepared for something coming. Before I could respond, Stone and his enforcers were gone. The heavy door slamming shut between us, I sank onto the bench, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Grief and rage warred within my chest, stealing my breath. My grandmother had been murdered, her gift exploited and corrupted by Stone's ambition. The hours passed in a haze of planning and mourning. By the time they came for me at midday, I had composed myself into a state of outward calm. Miriam's vial secure against my skin, and my grandmother's last message fixed firmly in my mind. When the king's control shatters, only the rejected can restore balance. The ceremonial clearing was packed with wolves, their expressions ranging from morbid curiosity to outright hostility. As the guards escorted me to the center, I scanned the crowd, noting the positions of potential allies. Miriam stood among the elders, her face carefully blank. Marco was near the back, his posture tense, and at the edges of the gathering, watching with keen intensity, stood 4 unfamiliar wolves, the king's scouts, their formal attire and alert postures setting them apart from the pack. Alpha Stone took his place at the head of the circle, Beta Stevens and Rachel flanking him. The formal proceedings began with a recitation of my alleged crimes: trespassing on sacred ground, performing forbidden rituals, and, most seriously, suspected witchcraft. The evidence was presented, the emptied vial found at the pool, witnesses who had seen the water glowing unnaturally, and my own presence at the scene. When asked to speak in my defense, I stepped forward, feeling the weight of every gaze upon me. The speech I had rehearsed in my cell evaporated, replaced by a bone-deep certainty that only the unvarnished truth would serve. I am not a witch, I began, my voice carrying across the suddenly hushed clearing. I am a seer, like my grandmother before me. The water showed me visions, warnings of danger coming to our pack. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Stone's expression darkened, but he allowed me to continue, perhaps confident in his control of the proceedings. I saw our pack torn apart by conflict. I saw the Alpha King driven to rage. I paused, gathering my courage for the most dangerous accusation, and I saw Alpha Stone practicing blood magic, corrupting himself in our territory with forbidden power. The murmurs became a roar of disbelief and shock. Stone slammed his fist down on the stone table before him, cracking the surface. "Enough!" he thundered, his voice laced with alpha command that made several weaker wolves drop to their knees. These are the desperate lies of a condemned woman. Evelyn Pierce seeks to sow discord on the eve of an important diplomatic visit. Then explain the disappearances, I countered, raising my voice to be heard above the din. Explain why 5 wolves sent on patrols never returned. Explain the sickness spreading through our territory, affecting the youngest and weakest first. I turned to address the pack directly, seeking out those who might be swayed. Many of you have felt it, the wrongness in the air, the growing aggression, the subtle changes in those closest to Stone. These are the signs of blood magic's corruption. Beta Stevens stepped forward, his face mottled with rage. This is sedition. She seeks to undermine our alpha's authority. I seek to save our pack, I corrected, forcing myself to remain calm. Look at him. Really look. The tremors, the unnatural heat, the changes in his scent. All symptoms of corruption. Some of the wolves began to do just that, their gazes shifting to Stone with new wariness. Even Rachel seemed momentarily uncertain, her eyes darting between her father and the alpha she had so loyally served. Stone recognized the dangerous shift in momentum. With practiced authority, he raised his hand for silence. Evelyn Pierce has demonstrated why the old ways forbade seers from our ranks. Their visions drive them to madness, to see threats where none exist. His voice softened, taking on a paternal tone that had swayed the pack many times before. I understand her fear. Change is coming to our pack. Prosperity, strength, a new era where we take our rightful place among the elite territories. The Alpha King comes not to judge, but to witness our ascension. It was a masterful redirection, appealing to the pack's pride and ambition. I could see many being swayed, their suspicions fading under his confident words. But the king's scouts remained stone-faced, their attention unwavering. They, at least, were not so easily manipulated. "If I speak madness, then test my claims," I challenged. "The sacred waters reveal truth to all who look. Let the king's representatives witness as we both submit to their judgment." It was a dangerous gambit. The waters would reveal Stone's corruption, but they would also expose my own unusual abilities to the entire pack. Still, it was the only way to provide proof beyond my word against his. Stone's expression hardened. "Our sacred sites are not spectacles for outsiders," he said dismissively. "The trial continues." One of the king's scouts stepped forward, a tall, lean wolf, with silver-streaked black hair and piercing gray eyes. "Actually, Alpha Stone, my king would be most interested in this test." His accent marked him as from the Northern Territories. "If the accused suggests a traditional truth-revealing, you can hardly refuse without raising questions." The subtle emphasis on the last word carried clear threat. Stone's jaw tightened, but he was cornered. To refuse now would be to admit guilt to the very observers he was trying to impress. "Very well," he conceded with poor grace. "We will convene at the Whispering Pool at sunset. Until then, Evelyn Pierce returns to her cell." As the guards moved to escort me away, I caught Miriam's eye across the clearing. The old woman gave me the barest nod of approval, but her expression remained troubled. We had forced Stone's hand, but in doing so, had accelerated whatever plans he had been nurturing. Back in my cell, I paced the small space, scenario after scenario playing through my mind. Sunset was hours away, time Stone would undoubtedly use to prepare countermeasures. The vial Miriam had given me pressed against my ribs, a small comfort against the mounting danger. A soft sound at my door drew my attention. The small viewing panel slid open, revealing Marco's concerned face. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "As well as can be expected," I replied, moving closer to the door. "Stone won't risk the water revealing his true nature. He'll have something planned for tonight." Marco nodded grimly. "The scouts are watching him closely now, but he's called a private meeting with his inner circle. Rachel is there." Pain flashed across his features at the mention of his sister, and Evelyn. "The king himself has arrived early. He's waiting at the territory border with his personal guard." The news sent a jolt through me, the black wolf from my vision. Here already, not tomorrow as planned. "Does Stone know?" "Not yet. The scouts are delaying the news until just before sunset." Marco glanced over his shoulder, then leaned closer to the opening. "Listen, whatever happens tonight, stay close to me or the royal guards. Something's wrong with Stone, with all his closest followers. They smell different. Dangerous. Blood magic changes its practitioners," I said softly. "It takes before it gives, corrupting mind and body." Marco's expression grew troubled. "I've seen my father's hands shake when he thinks no one is watching, and his temper." He shook his head. "Just be careful. I don't think Stone intends for tonight's ceremony to reveal anything but your supposed guilt." The sound of approaching footsteps cut our conversation short. Marco quickly slid the panel closed, his footsteps retreating down the corridor. Left alone again, I wrapped my fingers around Miriam's vial, drawing comfort from its solid presence. Sunset was approaching. Soon, I would stand before the Whispering Pool once more, with Stone beside me and the pack as witness. And somewhere at our territory's edge waited the Alpha King himself, the massive black wolf from my vision, the one who would lose control and change everything. Sunset painted the forest in hues of amber and crimson as the pack processed toward the Whispering Pool. Guards flanked me on either side, their grips tight on my arms though I made no attempt to escape. Ahead walked Alpha Stone, his back rigid with tension, Beta Stevens and Rachel close behind him. The king's scouts moved alongside the procession, watchful and alert. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath. No birds called, no small creatures rustled in the underbrush. Even the wind had died, leaving the trees unnaturally still. I felt it then, the wrongness Miriam had described, a subtle corruption that clung to the air like invisible mist. How had I never noticed it before? Perhaps it had grown so gradually that we had all become accustomed to its presence, like frogs in slowly heating water. As we approached the ancient oaks surrounding the pool, I spotted Elder Miriam waiting at the water's edge, ceremonial items arranged before her. Her face remained impassive, but her eyes found mine, Conveying silent encouragement, the pack formed a circle around the pool, their faces solemn in the fading light. Torches were lit, casting dancing shadows across the gathered wolves. I searched for Marco among them, finally locating him near the outer edge of the circle, his expression tense, but determined. "We gather at the sacred waters," Elder Miriam announced, her voice stronger than it had been in years, "to seek truth in the face of grave accusations. Both the accused and the accuser will submit to the pool's judgment." Alpha Stone stepped forward, towering over Miriam's hunched form. "Let us be clear about the purpose of this ritual," he said, addressing the pack rather than the elder. "Evelyn Pierce stands accused of forbidden practices and sedition against her alpha. She has made wild accusations to divert attention from her own crimes. The waters will reveal her guilt." Miriam's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. "The waters reveal all truths, Alpha Stone. Not merely those we seek." She gestured toward the pool, which reflected the fiery sky above. "As tradition demands, both parties will contribute blood to the waters. The visions that follow will be witnessed by all." A murmur ran through the assembled wolves. The ritual was ancient, rarely performed in modern times. Most had never witnessed it, though all knew the legends, how the waters would show the truth of a person's heart, exposing lies and revealing hidden intentions. "The accused will go first," Stone declared, gesturing for the guards to bring me forward. I approached the pool's edge, my heart thundering in my chest. Miriam held out a ceremonial silver knife, its handle worn smooth by generations of use. Our fingers brushed as I took it, and I felt her press something small and hard into my palm along with the blade. A tiny river stone, smooth and black. Understanding flickered between us. The stone was a focus, something to direct my thoughts when the visions came. I closed my fingers around it, then knelt at the water's edge. The knife gleamed in the torchlight as I drew it across my palm, allowing 7 drops of blood to fall into the still waters. The effect was immediate. The pool began to glow with the same otherworldly light I had witnessed before, spreading outward from where my blood had touched the surface. Gasps and murmurs rose from the watching pack as the light intensified, casting all our faces in its eerie glow. Images formed in the water, visible to all who watched. My grandmother appeared, her face lined but kind, teaching me to identify healing herbs in this very forest. The vision shifted to me tending injured wolves after a territorial dispute, then to the rejection ceremony where I had stood alone before the pack. Each image reflected truth, but selectively, showing my loyalty, my service to the pack, my isolation. "This proves nothing," Beta Stevens growled. "Show us her practices at the pool last night." As if responding to his demand, the water rippled and reformed, showing my solitary figure pouring the vial's contents into the pool. But instead of portraying it as a dark ritual, the vision clearly showed the reverence and fear with which I had approached the waters. It showed the tears streaming down my face as I witnessed the devastating prophecies. And then, unexpectedly, the water revealed what I had seen: the black wolf's rage, the pack's internal conflict, Stone surrounded by forbidden artifacts. A collective gasp rose from the gathering as these images played across the pool's surface, Stone's face contorted with fury. "Enough," he commanded, stepping forward to disrupt the water with his boot, dissolving the images. "This is manipulation, not truth. The girl has obviously learned to control the visions." "That's not possible," Miriam countered, standing her ground despite Stone's intimidating presence. "The waters show only truth, untainted by desire or fear. Now it is your turn, Alpha, to submit to their judgment." Stone hesitated, trapped by protocol and the watchful eyes of the king's scouts. Finally, with obvious reluctance, he knelt at the pool's edge, taking the knife from my outstretched hand without meeting my eyes. His movements were stiff, almost mechanical, as he sliced his palm and allowed his blood to drip into the water. The reaction was violent and immediate. The pool's gentle glow turned harsh, pulsing with sickly yellow light that made several wolves step back in alarm. The water began to boil and churn, steam rising in noxious clouds that smelled of decay and something chemical and alien. Images formed, but fractured and twisted. Stone in a hidden chamber beneath the pack house, standing over the bound form of a young wolf I recognized as one of the missing patrol members, blood flowing into elaborate glass containers. Stone drinking something dark and viscous, then convulsing on the floor as his body absorbed the stolen power. My grandmother, strapped to a table, her face contorted in agony, as Stone extracted something luminous from her chest. The horror of it silenced even the most skeptical members of the pack. The evidence was undeniable, the corruption laid bare for all to witness. Stone lunged for the water again, trying to disrupt the damning visions, but the king's scouts moved with blinding speed, restraining him before he could reach the pool. "Blood magic," one of the scouts announced grimly. "The highest crime under pack law." Stone's composure shattered. With a roar of rage, he shifted forms, his wolf larger and more grotesque than I remembered, unnatural protrusions distorting his silhouette, his fur patchy, and his eyes glowing with the same sickly yellow light as the corrupted pool. "You understand nothing," he snarled, his voice distorted even in wolf form. "The old limitations are chains on our potential. With this power, our pack could rule territories beyond the mountains." Beta Stevens and several of Stone's inner circle shifted as well, moving to surround their alpha. I noticed with horror that they all bore the same subtle deformities, the price of sharing in Stone's forbidden power. The king's scouts shifted in response, their forms sleek and powerful. "By the authority of the Alpha King, you are commanded to stand down and submit to judgment," the lead scout declared. Instead of complying, Stone threw back his head and released a howl that seemed to tear at the very fabric of reality. The sound vibrated with unnatural power, causing several weaker wolves to collapse in pain, clutching their ears. The corruption in the air thickened, nearly visible now as a miasma that spread from Stone and his followers. I felt the pressure of it against my mind, trying to force submission. With trembling fingers, I reached for Miriam's vial, concealed in my clothing. As Stone's howl reached a crescendo, I crushed the vial against my skin, feeling the cool liquid spread across my palm. Instantly, my thoughts cleared, protected from Stone's influence. Around me, the pack was in chaos. Some fled in terror, others stood frozen in indecision, and a disturbing number moved to join Stone's side, their eyes glazing over as they succumbed to his power. Marco fought against the influence, his body half shifted as he struggled to maintain control. I grabbed Miriam's arm, pulling her toward the trees. "We need to go," I urged. "This is about to get much worse." "Wait," she said, her gaze fixed on the territory's edge beyond the ancient oaks. "He comes." The words had barely left her lips, when the air itself seemed to split with the force of an answering howl, deeper, more primal, and infinitely more powerful than Stone's corrupted cry. The sound rolled through the forest like thunder, silencing all other noise and freezing every wolf in place. From between the trees emerged a wolf of such impossible size and presence that my breath caught in my throat. Midnight black from nose to tail, with eyes that burned like molten gold, the Alpha King made even Stone's enhanced form look diminished by comparison. Behind him came his guard, 8 wolves nearly as impressive as their leader, moving with lethal grace as they surrounded the clearing. The king's scouts immediately dropped to submissive postures, heads lowered in respect. Most of the pack followed suit instinctively, overwhelmed by the sheer dominance radiating from the newcomer. Only Stone and his closest followers remained defiant, growling their challenge. The Alpha King fixed his burning gaze on Stone, a low growl building in his massive chest. I recognized this moment from my vision, the confrontation that would lead to the king losing control, to the blood-red moon rising over a pack torn apart. Without thinking, I stepped forward, placing myself between the 2 alphas. "Wait," I called, my voice sounding small in the charged silence. "There's another way." The Alpha King's gaze shifted to me, surprise momentarily replacing rage in those golden eyes. Stone took advantage of the distraction, lunging toward me with jaws open, clearly intending to remove the threat to his plans. But before his teeth could find my throat, a blur of motion intercepted him. Marco, fully shifted now, had thrown himself between us. The sickening sound of fangs meeting flesh filled the clearing as Stone's attack found a different target. "No!" I screamed, watching in horror as Marco crumpled to the ground, blood darkening his copper-tinged fur. The sight of his sacrifice shattered something inside me, the last remnants of fear and hesitation. Time seemed to slow as I knelt beside Marco's fallen form. His breathing came in shallow gasps, blood pooling beneath him where Stone's unnaturally elongated fangs had torn into his side. Our eyes met, and I saw pain mingled with fierce determination in his gaze. "Not your fault," he managed, his voice barely audible. "My choice." Rage and grief collided within me, unlocking something that had lain dormant all my life. A reservoir of power I had never known existed. It rose through me like a tide, washing away uncertainty and fear, leaving only crystalline clarity in its wake. I placed my hands over Marco's wound, not knowing what I intended until I felt the warmth flowing from my palms into his torn flesh. Golden light spread beneath my fingers, knitting tissue and slowing the bleeding. It wasn't healing, not completely, but it was buying time. Marco's eyes widened in surprise, then understanding. He had always seen more in me than I had seen in myself. "Keep fighting," I whispered, rising to my feet to face the chaos that had erupted around us. Stone and the Alpha King circled each other in the center of the clearing, their massive forms radiating power of entirely different natures, one corrupt and hungry, the other primal and furious. Stone's followers had engaged the King's guard, creating a perimeter of snarling, fighting wolves. The rest of the pack scattered in terror or huddled at the edges of the clearing, paralyzed by conflicting loyalties and fear. Miriam appeared at my side, her ancient face set with grim determination. "The vision," she reminded me urgently. "What did you see at this moment? What choice must you make?" The fragmented images from the whispering pool aligned in my mind. Myself standing between two powers, something small and bright that both sought to possess. I had assumed it was an object, some physical artifact of value. But now, with power humming beneath my skin and clarity flooding my thoughts, I understood what my grandmother had been preparing me for. "It's not a thing," I told Miriam, my voice steady despite the battle raging around us. "It's a role, a purpose." Understanding dawned in the old woman's eyes. "The mediator," she breathed. "Not seen among our kind for 5 generations." I nodded, the truth of it resonating through my bones. The mediator, a wolf with a rare ability to stand between alphas, to weather their dominance without being crushed by it, to speak truth that even the most powerful must hear. My rejection had been necessary. Only by standing apart from pack hierarchies could I fulfill this destiny. Before I could explain further, a deafening roar split the air. The Alpha King had Stone pinned to the ground, massive jaws closing around the corrupted Alpha's throat. This was the moment from my vision. The killing that would trigger catastrophe, sending ripples of violence through every pack under the King's rule. "Stop!" I cried, moving toward them with a certainty I had never before possessed. "This isn't the way!" To my amazement, both Alphas hesitated, their attention drawn by something in my voice that compelled recognition. I walked steadily into the space between them, feeling their combined dominance like a physical weight pressing against my skin. Under normal circumstances, no wolf could stand in this position without being forced to their knees. Yet I remained upright, my back straight and my gaze level. "Blood has already been spilled," I said, gesturing to Marco and the other injured wolves around the clearing. "More death won't cleanse the corruption that Stone has unleashed. It will only spread it further." The Alpha King growled, clearly torn between the ancient instinct to eliminate a challenger and curiosity about this strange wolf who dared to intervene. Stone used the momentary distraction to wriggle free, backing away with hatred burning in his yellow eyes. "The girl is mine to judge," he snarled. "My pack, my territory, my rules. Not anymore," rumbled a deep voice as the Alpha King shifted into human form. Standing upright, he was even more imposing. A towering figure with skin like burnished bronze and hair as black as his fur had been. Despite the chill in the air, he seemed impervious to cold, power rolling off him in palpable waves. "You forfeited your right to rule when you turned to blood magic, Stone." Stone's laugh was an ugly, distorted sound. "And what will you do, Dominic Blackthorn? Kill me? Execute every wolf who followed me? My power is already part of this territory, seeping into the earth and water. It cannot be undone by mere death." The Alpha King, Dominic, tensed, and I saw in his eyes the same realization I had reached through my visions. Stone was right. Killing him would not purge the corruption. It might even release it more fully into the territory, poisoning everything it touched. "There is another way," I said, drawing both Alpha's attention once more. "The ancient rite of purification. It requires a willing vessel to channel and contain the corruption." Miriam gasped behind me, understanding immediately what I proposed. "Evelyn, no, it could destroy you." "What is this rite?" Dominic demanded, his golden eyes fixed intently on my face. "A ritual my grandmother taught me," I explained, the knowledge flowing through me as if she herself were whispering in my ear. It can draw corruption from land, water, and living beings, but it must be contained within a vessel strong enough to hold it until it can be properly cleansed. And you believe you are this vessel? Stone mocked, though I caught the flicker of unease beneath his bravado. A rejected wolf with no rank or power? That's exactly why it must be me, I replied calmly. I stand outside the hierarchies. I'm not bound by the same pack dynamics that would allow the corruption to spread through those connections. Dominic studied me with newfound interest. You're a mediator, he said. Not a question, but a recognition. I thought your kind had disappeared from the bloodlines. Nearly, I acknowledged. My grandmother was the last known before me. Understanding dawned in Stone's eyes, quickly replaced by calculation. So that's why Maeve's blood yielded such powerful visions. I should have realized. His gaze hardened as he looked at me with new hunger. Perhaps I'll keep you alive after all, little mediator. Your blood could enhance my work tenfold. You'll have to go through me first, Dominic growled, stepping partially in front of me in a protective gesture that surprised us both. I placed a hand on his arm, feeling the tremendous power thrumming beneath his skin. This isn't about dominance or possession, I said quietly. It's about balance. What the Alpha King is sworn to maintain above all else. Something shifted in Dominic's expression. A reluctant acknowledgement that I had named his deepest oath. The Alpha King was not merely the strongest wolf, but the living embodiment of balance between packs, territories, and the natural world. It was this sacred duty that Stone's corruption threatened most directly. How do we perform this ritual? Dominic asked, his deep voice resonating with authority that made even Stone pause. We need 3 elements, I said, the knowledge continuing to flow through me from some ancestral memory. Water from the whispering pool, untainted earth from the heart of the territory, and blood freely given by the pack's purest heart. My gaze drifted to where Marco lay, now propped against a tree, watching the proceedings with feverish intensity. Though wounded, his eyes were clear and resolute. He nodded slightly, understanding what I needed without words being spoken. I'll prepare the ritual circle, Miriam said, moving with surprising agility to gather what we needed. Stone's laughter cut through the momentary calm. You think I'll simply stand by and allow this? He shifted back to wolf form, his corrupted body even more grotesque than before, bones visibly moving beneath stretched skin as the blood magic continued its destructive work. My followers, to me, the wolves who had sided with Stone, some by choice, others compelled by his unnatural influence, gathered around their alpha. They were outnumbered by the combined forces of the King's Guard and those pack members who had remained true. But the bloodshed of a direct confrontation would feed the very corruption we sought to contain. Wait, I called, an idea forming as I recalled the vial Miriam had given me for protection. Their minds are not their own. The corruption influences them like a poison. I turned to Miriam, who was arranging stones in a circle near the pool. The protection potion, can you make enough for all of them? The elder's eyes widened in understanding. The ingredients grow nearby, but it would take time to brew. Time we don't have, Stone snarled, tension building as his followers grew more agitated. Dominic stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. My guards will hold them back. You two prepare what's needed for the ritual. His gaze locked with mine, something unreadable passing between us. Whatever you need, you have my authority behind it. With the Alpha King's support, the clearing transformed into a flurry of purposeful activity. Miriam directed several clear-headed pack members to gather the herbs and materials she needed, while Dominic's guards formed a barrier between Stone's faction and the ritual preparations. I knelt beside Marco, who had been moved closer to the pool at my request. I need your blood for the ritual, I explained softly. But it must be freely given, with full understanding of what it means. Marco's hand found mine, his grip surprisingly strong despite his injury. I've always believed in you, Evelyn, even when no one else did. He smiled faintly. My blood is yours. I squeezed his hand gratefully, then moved to help Miriam complete the ritual circle. At the center, we placed a clay bowl filled with water from the whispering pool. Around it, we arranged small mounds of earth from the 7 sacred sites within our territory. The circle itself was marked with salt and herbs known for their purifying properties. It's ready, Miriam announced, as the last rays of daylight faded from the sky. Night had fallen, and with it, the full moon rose above the trees, bathing the clearing in silver light. Stone had been watching our preparations with growing unease, his corrupted form shifting restlessly at the edge of the clearing. His followers, too, seemed increasingly agitated, some clutching their heads as if in pain. "The corruption fights against containment," Miriam explained grimly. "We must act quickly." I took my place at the center of the circle, the clay bowl before me. Taking the ceremonial knife, I approached Marco one last time. With gentle hands, I collected several drops of his blood in a small vial, murmuring thanks for his sacrifice. Returning to the circle, I added Marco's blood to the pool water, watching as it swirled and took on a faint golden glow, pure and untainted by corruption. The final ingredient was my own contribution. As mediator, I would serve as the conduit for the cleansing. "Once you begin, you cannot stop until the ritual is complete," Miriam warned me, her ancient eyes filled with concern. "The corruption will fight. It will try to break your concentration, to make you doubt." I nodded, settling more comfortably on the ground. "I'm ready." Miriam began to chant in the old language, words passed down through generations of healers and seers. As her voice rose and fell in the ancient cadence, I dipped my fingers into the mixture of water and blood, then pressed them to my forehead, heart, and the earth beneath me. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Connection flooded through me, to the land, to the pack, to every living thing within our territory. I felt the healthy pulse of life, but also the sickening wrongness of Stone's corruption, spreading like black veins through the spiritual body of our home. With focused intent, I began to draw that corruption toward me, functioning as a filter that separated poison from lifeblood. The sensation was excruciating, like acid flowing through my veins, like fire consuming me from within. I gasped, but maintained my concentration, guided by my grandmother's teachings and my own newly awakened abilities. Stone realized what was happening too late. As the corruption began to leach from him and his followers, he howled in rage and desperation, launching himself toward the circle in a last attempt to stop the ritual. But Dominic was faster, intercepting the corrupted alpha in midair and pinning him to the ground once more. "It's working," I heard Miriam call, her voice seeming to come from very far away as I sank deeper into the cleansing trance. Through half-lidded eyes, I watched as Stone's followers began to collapse one by one, the unnatural influence draining from them as the corruption found a new vessel. My body trembled with the effort of containing so much darkness, so much twisted power. When it seemed I could bear no more, I felt a warm presence beside me. Opening my eyes fully, I saw Dominic kneeling at the edge of the circle, his golden gaze fixed on mine with an intensity that should have been overwhelming, but instead felt like an anchor. "You're not alone in this," he said, his deep voice cutting through the pain and chaos in my mind. "Let me help carry the burden." Understanding what he offered, I reached out one shaking hand. Dominic grasped it firmly, and immediately, strength flowed between us, not dominance or submission, but partnership and balance. The Alpha King, sworn to maintain harmony between all packs, lending his considerable power to the cleansing of corruption. Together, we completed the ritual as the moon reached its zenith. The last tendrils of darkness extracted from the land, and the affected wolves flowed into the containment we had created, a spiritual prison formed of will and ancient magic, bound within a small obsidian stone that now gleamed darkly in the center of the ritual bowl. As the final words of the chant faded into silence, I slumped forward, utterly drained. Dominic caught me before I could fall, his strong arms surprisingly gentle as he helped me from the circle. "It's done," Miriam announced, carefully lifting the obsidian stone with a cloth, avoiding direct contact. "The corruption is contained." Around the clearing, Stone's former followers were regaining consciousness, confusion and horror dawning on their faces as they remembered what they had done under the corruption's influence. Stone himself lay unconscious. His form reverted to a more natural state, though he looked decades older than he had before. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice hoarse from exertion. Dominic's expression was solemn as he surveyed the aftermath. "Stone will face the council's judgment for his crimes. Those who knowingly participated will join him. The others," he gestured to the confused wolves now being tended by pack members, "will have a chance at redemption." "And the pack?" I glanced around at my home, my people. now left without leadership. They will need time to heal, Dominic replied. His gaze returned to me, something warm kindling in those golden eyes. And they will need a guide who understands both strength and compassion. I shook my head, understanding his implication. I'm not an alpha. I can't lead them. No, he agreed. You're a mediator, rarer and in many ways more valuable. The pack needs restructuring, a new approach that balances the old ways with necessary change. A slight smile curved his lips. Perhaps we can work together on that. The Alpha King's presence would lend authority to such a transition. The offer surprised me, but before I could respond, Marco called my name weakly from where he lay. I hurried to his side, relief washing over me as I saw the worst of his injuries had begun to heal now that the corruption was gone. You did it, he murmured, smiling despite his pain. You saved us all. I took his hand, emotion tightening my throat. We did it together. All of us. My gaze drifted to the gathered wolves. Miriam with her ancient wisdom, Marco with his unwavering loyalty, even Rachel, who now approached her brother with tears of remorse streaming down her face, and Dominic, the Alpha King who had set aside centuries of tradition to work alongside a rejected wolf. As dawn broke over the whispering pool, painting the sky in hues of promise, I realized that my grandmother had been right all along. True strength didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered in the spaces between heartbeats, in the moments when we chose to rise instead of break. I had accepted rejection, only to find my true purpose, standing not within the pack structure, but between and beyond it. And as Dominic's warm gaze found mine across the clearing, I understood that this ending was also a beginning. For the pack, for myself, and perhaps for something new between a mediator and an Alpha King who had both discovered that the most profound power came not from dominance, but from balance.